All right, go ahead, John. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna start the screen share here. Hopefully everybody can see that.
Yeah, it looks good, John.
Okay. Yeah, let me get rid of this small window on the right here. There we go. Okay. So welcome everybody. Clicker's not working.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. Thanks. So everybody, for those that don't know me, my name is John Parker. I'm the owner, operator, builder, jack of all trades, master of none on the BNSF Railway division. And I'm glad to be here. I've been part of these conference calls since we started them. I've taken away a lot of great things, and I'm not sure what happened here, but let me get rid of that. So I'm glad to be here and glad to reciprocate and share with everybody. Not sure what's going on here. So tonight we're going to talk about just the layout overview and some of the things that we've done specifically designed for operations. We're going to talk about planning and starting in the overall management of the operating session. Some of the things that we do on the BNSF Railway division that are somewhat unique. We're not going to dive into, or I'm not going to dive into car forwarding or dispatching, things like that. You've probably heard enough of that here, but we'll talk about some different things that we do on the railroad. And we'll end with a Q&A. I've got a pretty big deck here, and I'm sure you don't want to hear me drone on for too long, so I'll try to get through them as quickly as possible. Okay, so we'll talk about the layout. The BNSF Railway division is a modern prototype freelance model railroad set in generally 2016, 2017. Started construction in 2007. We have a modern CTC software that manages mainline traffic control, built by Rodney Black. It's called CATS. Some of you might be familiar with that. There are 2 branch lines, a couple of interchanges with other railroads, and Union Pacific has trackage rights over the railroad. And it was really designed and built for operations in mind. This isn't my first large layout, and designing it for people first was really the primary objective, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And it is a multi-deck layout, and the reason I went with a multi-deck was to maximize the mainline length, of course, increase the distance between locations and add some green or some non-functioning space to create that perception of length, provide some long mainline runs and switching combination of both. Got a big enough footprint. We'll talk about that to do that. And I really wanted to create a feeling of isolation so that when the operator's out on a train, they're by themselves. They're not listening or hearing other people, seeing other trains, seeing other activity. And so those were the primary design objectives for the layout. At a glance, here's some statistics. I get a lot of questions about the layout. It's in a footprint of about 3,000 square feet. That does include the crew lounge and the dispatching office and my shop. There are well over 1,000 freight cars, 120 locomotives that are operational on the layout, 21 plus scale miles point to point, not including sidings or yard track or anything like that. It's linear footage. The lighting is daytime color tone fluorescent. Just haven't made that switch over to daytime LEDs yet, but we do have night time running with blue LEDs. So we do operate occasionally at night. It's kind of fun. The track height from the floor you're standing on is 48 and 58 inches generally, and we'll get into some of that. 12 DCC boosters, over 50 circuit breakers, circuit breaker protected power districts. And to date, we're, I think, somewhere between 120 and 130 operating sessions of course, bringing everyone together, friends, acquaintances, people from around the world have been here to operate, and it's been a pleasure to be their host and to share the layout with everyone. So the layout is a multi-level layout, and it's a mushroom concept. It's very difficult to visualize or comprehend, to understand the mushroom. I mean, I had difficulty myself learning, and it took a while to understand the concepts. And I have a small crew that helped me build the layout initially, and it was even difficult for them and for me to communicate and help them understand until we got a lot of the bench work in, that people really took hold of it. So, but it is hard to conceptualize the mushroom. It's best described as a singular double level around the room perimeter, but in the center peninsulas, you can see in the diagram here, the multi-level and the decks face opposite directions. And to see one, you're standing on the lower level. In my case, this is the basement floor. And then I have a 16-foot raised floor, 16-foot raised floor to view the upper deck. So the layout height is 48 inches from the viewing at the lower level, and 58 on top of the 15 or 16 inches to view the upper level. And of course, with that height, it's important to have some extra headroom in the basement. So when I built the home, I added between 10 and 11 inches, and kind of tucked up the utilities into the floor joist as much as possible. But this gives you an idea of the photo on the right in terms of how much space we added to the foundation to increase the ceiling height. So the construction is typical L girder. We talked about the 16-inch raised floor. What really piqued my curiosity about the mushroom was the shadow box appearance, which I really enjoyed, and you'll see some pictures of that. But these are some cutaway photos of the bench work. You can see the raised floor on the left, in the left photo, lower left. And those deck heights, are opposite facing. So, and here we have a before and after. The photo on the left is the pure bench work, and on the right, believe it or not, standing in the same place. It's on the right is what you see is finished. Even though there's a second deck on the upper portion on the left-hand side of the photo on the right, simply a lighting balance on the right-hand side over the yard. That's the finished appearance. And again, I really wanted to plan for people first, and I took a quote from Byron Henderson. Probably most of you know Byron. And we took some layout ideas from a casino, influencing the movement of visitors, and controlling where visitors look are key elements of the casino design. And we can certainly borrow a few ideas, and I've certainly done that. If any of you have been into a casino, you know that they direct focus on the action, which is what I wanted to do, and that shadow box really helps people look at the layout, look and what they're doing. They're not distracted. Created an attractive, comfortable space. You'll see some photos of the layout. Everything's carpeted, skirting, a nice finish, just like the casino. Guiding operators and visitors, they call it wayfinding. If you ever have been in a casino and you look up, you read signs, it tells you where to go. And that's because it's difficult to find your way out, or to find an exit, or to find what you're looking for. They want you to focus your action on the gambling. I want you to focus your attention and action on the layout. And facilitate people movement. I have chosen a minimum 36-inch aisle space, generally speaking. It's much wider at the yards and in stationary operating positions, generally 48 inches, sometimes a little bit larger than that. And that's because this is where people come in and pick up their trains. Maybe they wait while a yard or somebody's doing some work. Maybe there's a busy area where people are passing to go to and from different areas of the layout. So those areas I've designed specifically at least 48 inches. And when I went through the planning process, I used a 24-inch radius for people planning, so that areas that had operators, such as in the yard or switching in industry, so forth, there was nobody else that would be in close proximity and that's where how I planned the layout of certain areas of the layout based on where people would work, so that there was some separation. And I really wanted to create that feeling of isolation. I wanted to place the operator in the scene with the shadow box and not be distracted by something else happening across the room. So I do use a lot of view blocks, pockets, alcoves to really isolate the operator, especially where there's a lot of work going on. Backdrops and walls. There's nothing you can see over your, the backdrops and the walls go all the way to the ceiling. And the aisles themselves are long, but they curve. And where the curve happens, there's some obstruction, whether it's a mountain or an overpass or a large structure, so that you can't see over the layout down the aisle longer. And of course, that all creates the perception of longer trains, length and distance in terms of where you're working. You don't know what's coming or what's been through, or where it's going, or what somebody else is doing. And that was my real intention. And I really want to take care of my guests here, so I create a warm and friendly operating environment. The entire layout's carpeted, ventilation, HVAC, air supply and returns. I've done a lot of work to balance that supply and return when people are in the layout in the basement. I've actually had to add some supply and some returns to make that air movement much better. And typically when we have 18 or 20 operators in the basement, sometimes, especially in the summer, I like to pre-cool, just because when we get that many people, the body heat can raise, and it's not uncommon to get a 5 or 6, 8 degree temperature increase in the basement. So I'm trying to keep it as comfortable as possible. And also we do have a comfortable crew lounge, a place for operators to take a break. Not too comfy though. This is a picture of the late Paul Sullivan, who loved to operate here, and he was notorious for a 4 or 5 minute power nap between trains. And he fell right into that chair, so worked out perfect. I'm a firm believer in keeping it organized and clean, hide the mess. I really try to eliminate the distractions. I probably have more junk under my layout than everybody else on the call combined, but it's well hidden. I keep the clutter away. There's no construction materials around. Everything is related to the layout is on the layout that's related to operations. So I do have an occasional shelf for pencils and picks and keys and so forth, like you see here at the yard. But generally everything's put away, and there's really no distractions. And I really feel that if you keep it clean and neat, I think the operators will respect and take care of your equipment and the layout. And that's certainly been the case here. So I appreciate that. Everybody does a really good job of protecting the assets on the layout and taking care of it. We do get some collateral damage during operations, but that's expected. But generally, people are very respectful, and I think it's because the layout and the appearance is there, and they understand that. And of course, operator safety. We've got a lot of people in the layout, so we've got stair lighting to get up to that raised floor, first aid kits, fire extinguishers, emergency lighting, and so forth. Everything you would expect. And wayfinding. We talked about that in the casino, and that's certainly the case on the Fall River Division. This is a control point map, if you will, on the fascia of the layout. They're all consistent. As you're viewing the layout, you're looking north. So just like you're looking at a map, west is to your left, east is to your right. It's got the key areas that as an operator you would be interested in. The mine is to the left going westbound, and eastbound Fall River Yard, Kimber, Winston, and so forth. And this particular control point is a double crossover on a 2-track high-speed main line. And the operators require a key to, when they get authority to, if they need to use the turnouts in manual mode, if they get authorization or authority from the dispatcher, they can use their key to throw the turnouts locally. Dispatcher can see that, and then they push the button. And so this is pretty consistent with all the control points on the fascia for the layout. We tell them where they're at and what's coming up to the west or to the east. And of course, this is what you can expect when you come over. It's like a maze. And this is why we need to have wayfinding. It's easy to get lost in the action. So this is just a layout diagram. I have copies on my webpage, and if you go to my webpage, I've got main level and the upper level, and you can zoom in on the webpage to see the detail of the layout diagram. I know this is probably hard to see, but it gives you a general idea of the layout itself. So my house in the basement, 3,000 square foot, is like a big box where it says upper level. That's cut out for the garage. We haven't gone underneath the garage, so it's about 3,000. It's more than 3,000 square feet in the basement here. And this cartoon showed up on my fascia. Somebody brought it in. I still don't know who it is, but I love it. And it showed up on the fascia in one of the aisles. And that's certainly the idea I was going after. So I take it as a compliment, but it's a great cartoon. Okay, operations. See how we're doing on time here. So our primary purpose really is to have fun by typically simulating the operating practices of the BNSF Railroad. So we're modeling the prototype railroad operations, much like we're modeling a freight car. We want to be as accurate, and we want to represent how the railroad function as close as possible. And we do that with about 20 people each month. This was pre-COVID, where we had 20. Right now we're doing between 17, 18, 19 operators, and we'll probably get back up to 20, 21, 22 slowly. So we do it with a blend of regular operating crews and guests and visitors. I always save a slot or two for people that express interest in operating, and I've got a list. And so I try to invite at least one or two new people to every session and get them introduced to the hobby, or at least to operations, and it seems to work out well. We do use prototype practices, including the use of CTC for mainline traffic control authority, train and freight car handling, make sure there's no hazmat cars behind the power and all that good stuff. We have prototypically correct or somewhat correct paperwork. We use two-way radios just like they do on the BNSF and so forth. We do use special instructions, Form A's, Form B's, bulletins when it's necessary. And we'll talk about some of that. And there are a variety of jobs to accommodate a variety of individual operator interests. Everybody's got a passion for certain types of jobs on the railroad. Some people love to work in the yard, love to dispatch, love to work in the traffic center, or they just want to run from point to point on the extra board. And or they're on the branch line by themselves, but I've got quite a variety of jobs, and I think that really helps. And the job selection is based on seniority. Some of the positions may be two-person jobs. This was pre-COVID again. A lot of the locals, if we have enough people, we'll do two-person jobs. Sometimes people want to operate with somebody, their friend or their acquaintance or what have you, and we can certainly accommodate that, especially the locals that work out of the yards. And all trains operate between crew change points on the Fall River Division. The operators don't have to mess with going in and out of staging, and we'll talk about that. But it makes it convenient. They pick up the train on a layout somewhere and they run it over and they take it to another crew change point where the traffic center, traffic manager brings it into staging. And we'll talk about a little bit more of that. And post-COVID operating sessions, I'm not sure if we're really post-COVID, but we have started operating. We started third and fourth quarter of last year. We've had probably 5 or 6 operating sessions since the total shutdown. And I did talk to a lot of our operators to understand what made them feel comfortable and under what circumstances or what conditions they would come back and operate. So we had a general agreement at the time. And everybody seems to be okay with that. At least they're coming to operate. So I'm guessing they're okay. Okay, let's talk about the session planning here, the invitation. I generally send an email out 3 weeks to prior to the session starting. And I consistently operate on the second Saturday of each month. There are a number of other layouts in northern Colorado and the Colorado Front Range that operate. So we've kind of got an agreement. Other layouts take the first, I take the second. There's some that take the third and the fourth Saturday of every month. And that really helps the operators kind of pre-plan for the session, helps my family members plan and get out of the house. I try to stay very consistent with that second Saturday of every month. There was a lot of discussion on how you find operators on some of the discussion groups. And my experience has been build it and they'll come. I've got I'm over 70, probably 75 people on my invitation list. And so I typically don't have any problems finding operators. I've got a blend of regulars that I invite to every session. These are people that operators that have been with me since the beginning, that have helped build the railroad, or own layouts, and we reciprocate and always invite each other. There are some other people that are semi-regulars that go through a rotation that have been with me for quite a while. And then, as I said, I typically hold a few slots for every session for guests or visitors. And I always close on my invitation by saying, if I don't hear from you, someone will be invited in your absence. I really do expect the courtesy of a response. I'm inviting you into my home just like for a dinner party, and I do expect a response. And if I don't hear from you, then I will. If I don't hear from you by a certain date, I'll just remove you from that session invite, and I'll invite somebody else. I've got a pretty big waiting list, so I generally don't have any problems with this. Occasionally, and I've got to stick to my own rule, but occasionally somebody does forget, and they lose their slot, and I give them plenty of time to respond back to. So, but it really hasn't been a problem. So I get a lot of questions about what I have to do to prepare the layout for a session, how much time I spend, and generally I spend probably less than an hour prepping for a 4-hour operating session. I do check car placement before the session starts, and make sure we have a few dog catch trains so that at the beginning of the session, nobody's sitting down. Everybody has the chance to work if they want to right away. Typically, we have enough leftover trains from the previous session on the layout that there's always a few trains out there to run. And I do give a head start for the yard. There's a local that I put together on the departure track. Just because it leaves at 6 o'clock when the session starts, 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., depending on what session we're running. So I do provide a quick head start for the yard. And I clean a few problematic track spots. I don't clean the entire track before the sessions, but there are 3 or 4 areas that generally get more dirty than others. So in general, I would say I spend probably an average of an hour, preparing the layout for a session. And I always open the doors a half hour before the session start. That's in my note, what time the doors open. I do have a sign I put on the front door. A lot of operators show up early, and if they show up before this half hour, they'll probably catch me in my pajamas, and that's never a good sight. So when they see the sign on the door, they can come in, and it keeps the neighbors out. When there's 20 cars parked out in front of my home, a lot of the neighbors think that I'm having an open house or something's going on, because I have had open houses. And a number of times I've had people just walk into the house and show up at an operating session, neighbors and people from the neighborhood, because they think I'm having an open house. So I always put a sign out there saying that it's closed to the public, and that seems to work most of the time. So I greet everybody as they arrive. I check off and do a head count. When there's 20 people here and they're dispersed throughout the layout, it's hard for me to remember who's who. So I do check them off. Operators get acquainted, review what's new on the layout. A guest will receive a tour from another operator during the first half hour or so. And it really is the social half hour before we start to work. So we kind of get that out of the way, and seems to work out well. I do have a short crew briefing. I keep it very short. I welcome everybody, introduce new operators or guests, and I always make sure to thank people that bring drinks or food or snacks. Most people do that, so I know everybody appreciates that. I typically review what's new related to operations on the layout. So there's new scenery, new engines, things like that. I don't talk about it, but really what's related to their operating, we discuss. As an example, we recently renamed the two high-speed main lines, Main 1 and Main 2, consistent with what the BNSF does. Those were previously called the North and South Main. So those are the types of things that we talk about that they need to know as an operator. And I always review important reminders. If it's things that people are forgetting to do, I think last time we talked about ensuring to close the D rails because some operators were leaving D rails open and weren't protecting the main from industries or a junction, what have you. And I always ask people to remind them to provide some feedback. If they want to write on the manifest or the switch list that a coupler spring is missing, or hey, we should do this differently or that differently, I really encourage that. In fact, that's one of the things I require. People need to leave me feedback so that I can fix things or change things just to make it better for the next operating session. And we have a safety briefing. It's performed by a volunteer operator, and they will earn an extra 1/2 seniority point. I think everybody probably wants to listen to somebody else do it other than me, and that seems to work out really well. We talk about the basics, where the emergency exits are, what do we have to do in case of an evacuation, where we take roll call or head count, the assembly point at the neighbor's home, where the fire extinguishers are, power outage, what happens during a power outage, and so forth. So that's all important information. And we talked about seniority, and operators can earn seniority on the Fall River Division by helping at work sessions. Now, I haven't had any work sessions since COVID started, but we, for a while, we were having regular work sessions, and there was a crew that was coming on a regular basis to help, and they earned seniority points, rightfully so. Event participation. We do have a number of open houses, guest operating sessions. We've got Rocky upcoming, so some people will help during Rocky Op, and they'll earn seniority for assisting during these events. When you operate here, you do receive 1 seniority point or 2 points for those jobs that don't turn a wheel or might be less popular and that really works and helps encourage people to take some of those jobs. Some people really strive to get more seniority points so that, when they need them, they can use them to get the job that they want to select. And people that drive distances will receive an additional seniority point based on the distance they live from my home. So if you're outside of a 30-mile or 60-mile radius, you might earn a 10th or a 20th more seniority. And guest job selection. I really want to make it a point to feel, for new operators to feel comfortable. I've had some bad experiences, and it's been my fault that I've placed new operators in positions and they didn't do well and they felt uncomfortable. And I think it gave them a bad taste for operations. So I really don't want to do that. So I try to talk to operators before they show up here to see how comfortable they might be. Do they want to work on their own? Do they need a pilot? And what would they want to do to feel comfortable? So I always make it a point to do that. And if they want to return and continue to operate here, they'll be entered into the seniority system, if you will. So when at the start of a session, we select jobs. Most of the time, 80% of the time, I do a seniority top down, and there's some randomness built into this. I have an application. It's a relational database that actually tracks all this, tracks the person's name, what job they had, how many points they've earned. And it goes into this database, and then it kicks out a report with some randomness But generally speaking, it's top down with the most senior person on top and second, third, fourth, all the way down to everybody that's here. And we do that about 80% of the time. 10% of the time, occasionally we'll take that same list and go bottoms up, just to give some people a better chance with low seniority of getting a job that they want to try, or they've been really wanting to learn. So that helps. And then we'll also do just a completely random selection. Sometime we'll throw their names into a hat, totally random. And typically when we do that, after everybody's got a job, I'll give them 3 or 4 minutes to negotiate with each other to see if they want to trade jobs. That's kind of fun. Also have a rule that no job can be repeated more than 2 consecutive times. When I generate this report from the app, it says cannot choose. So I know that if John Parker was the yard master for the 2 previous sessions, John Parker cannot choose it for that third session and has to pick another job. And I really believe that increases our skills across the spectrum in terms of operators and different jobs. We're kind of forcing people to take a different job. It also provides some opportunities for other people, other operators to work, those jobs that might get taken all the time. And then we sign up for the job and we go make some money for the railroad. We go operate. This is just a screenshot of the application that I'm using. I just hit print and it prints out a list of everybody who's going to be here, and the selection. I can print out different reports, who's got the most reports, a full report for each operator based on their history. And I've got this going back for 14 or 15 years with jobs they've had. It's a pretty good application. It's an access-based, custom written application that I use. And these are the jobs. We have a dispatcher, 2 people that work in the traffic center, a traffic manager and assistant, 4 yard jobs. Yard master, classification in the east side, west side. It also works the intermodal yard. A hostler, Crater Creek branch job. It's off the main line, switching just everything off the branch. Public service coal shuttle that goes back and forth. Kimber yard crew, which is a small yard that does some classification, some industry switching. 2 locals that go out of the yard, Kimber Crawler and the Detectors Dodger, and the others are just extra board, and we'll talk about that. So the traffic center, this is an active staging area, and we use JMRI operations in real time. So the traffic manager is generating manifests and switch lists in real time. And when the train's finished, the traffic manager terminates that and makes those cars available for another move. 2 people work back here, an assistant, the traffic manager and an assistant. In fact, I think the guy on the right here is on the call. And they also manage all the crews. So they're keeping track of who's available, who's up for a train. And they know the schedule in terms of what needs to be run. And it's really a management job in terms of making the overall railroad run, and it's a pretty critical job. They're also monitoring the CTC panel that the dispatcher has. And this allows them to see what trains might be ending soon and which crews might be available. So that's a nice addition to have that CTC monitor in the traffic center. The extra board, let me get rid of something here. We'll talk about that real quick. It's a blend of through trains and switching jobs that typically don't take the entire session. The traffic manager, part of the role of the traffic manager is to ensure that each operator has a blend of those unit trains, point-to-point trains, coal trains, Amtrak, and so forth. Industrial switching jobs, there's a large industrial park, paper mill, cement plant, that a mill that has interplant switching. Locals, some of the shorter locals that don't take as long to run are also called off the extra board. Work trains, special moves, and so forth. So the traffic manager is kind of managing what jobs they're taking so that the operators on the extra board get a blend of work. Also, each operator is assigned what's called a crew card, and this is their ticket to run. So the crews provide their crew cards to the traffic manager, And if the traffic manager has their crew cards, they know that they're available. So the crew, the operators hang out in the crew lounge and they wait for a crew call from the traffic manager. And they'll say, "Hey, Doug, your train is ready. It's a manifest at a crew change point on a layout." This picture right here is a crew change called Richland, I'm sorry. And this is pretty typical crew change point with a departure track from staging. So this train on the track is on the departure track. It's waiting for a crew. So Doug Acromis would get his paperwork and his crew card back. He's got it in his possession, and he would go get on board the train and start his journey. He might go to the yard. There are different crew change points throughout the layout. And when they're finished, they return their paperwork and the crew card back to the traffic manager. They'll arrive on the other track here, which is a arrival track at the crew change point. Dispatchers control the arrival track and the traffic center has control of the departure track there. And if Doug, for example, is finished with his train and he wants to go have a smoke or go use the bathroom or whatever, he'll hold on to that card, put it in his pocket. And that way the traffic manager knows that he's not available. He's on a break or he's doing whatever. Maybe he just wants to get off his feet. When he's ready, Doug will put that card, will give that card back to the traffic manager and be available. So operators here are kind of managing their own activity level. There's always something to do right away, but if you want to take a break, you hold on to your card. If you want to go run and work a train or go run a train, give it to the traffic manager and you'll get an assignment in just a few minutes. Okay, the public service coal train. This is a dedicated coal shuttle between the mine and the power plant. And during a 4-hour operating session, this will generally run between 1.5 and 2 round trips between the mine here and the power plant. So they load at the mine here, take it to the power plant, get a second set of empties, run back to the mine, get a load and run back to the power plant. So it's kind of a easy job back and forth, and some people just love it. We also occasionally, well, pre-COVID, run a 3-person job. This is called the Kimber Crawler. It's a westbound local that switches industries and interchanges west of Fall River Yard, turns at Kimber and comes back. And the 3 crew are an engineer, conductor, and brakeman. And this is more of a role-playing game or exercise, if you will. There's a set of rules that the operators get, and they have a briefing at the start of the session between the 3 of them. They talk about their roles and responsibilities. The conductor and brakeman are using figures. The engineers inside the cab with a proto throttle. For example, there's no talking if your figures are separated. If your figures are close, you can talk. Otherwise, it's hand signals. And there's a lot of rules. It's really a role-playing game, and it's really been well received. And in order to really get the full experience and enjoy this 3-person job, everybody's got to kind of follow the rules. Otherwise, you're ruining it for everybody else. But operators just seem to love it. So it's been very popular pre-COVID. Okay, we also use helpers on the grade between Kimber and Winston. And this is the ruling grade. It's on the layout. It's visible. It's about 1.7%. And certain trains do require helpers. It's based on the tonnage and the horsepower, and the operators will get a manifest. It'll say, if your tonnage exceeds this and your horsepower is less than X amount, then you need to let the dispatcher unit helper service, and then they'll call a crew off the extra board to help you up the hill. So there is this helper set is specifically configured. It weighs more, just like on the prototype. It's got a special front end coupler, so that it doesn't really couple to the end of the train that it's pushing up. And that does a couple of things. It helps prevent any accidental string lining if the operator's not focusing and paying attention. It also allows the helper set to be disconnected if they're not paying attention and not helping. And generally when we run the helpers, there's a few people watching. So the operators like to make sure they're really pushing and focusing on paying attention to where the slack action is in the train, and they're really pushing it up the hill. But this specialized coupler, this just simply modified KD coupler, seems to really help. Okay, we do live on the along the Front Range of Colorado, so we do have some seasonal influences when we operate. One is the plow train. This is a rotary plow. It's a two-person job. The plow operator runs the rotary. It does rotate. It's got sound, and you have to adjust the chute and so forth. And then the engineer runs the set of SD40-2s that push this, and they run up the grade. They clear, the mainline sidings. They Y up at Winston, and they come down. And we run this train on days that it snows along the Front Range. So I always watch the weather, and it's stationed at Kimber. And if it looks like it's snowing or going to snow, we'll run the plow train. And the same in the summertime when we have high fire danger, which we do this week because of the dryness and the high winds. We'll run a fire train. It's a simple patrol. Starts in Kimber, runs up over the mountains up to Winston and Wise, and comes back down just on patrol. And sometimes it might be a spot fire on the side of the right of way. You just never know. But these are kind of fun to run. We always have maintenance in the way. Sometimes we'll shut down a section of main line on the double track or a siding and issue some special instructions or forms, Form A's, Form B's, what have you. Run an occasional track inspection train, geometry train. We run high railers. So we do have a track inspector. And when the operator gets this job, they run a high railer, as you see here. And there's a whole list of things they're looking for while they're actually high railing the rail between 2 points. So this would get called off the extra board as well. Some technology that we use on the layout. We do have surveillance cameras at the coal mine. You can see the bridge here that the trains the coal empties have to go underneath before they load. And this is a view, and we do monitor for trespassers in the car. This is an O scale figure because it's more visible. And there's a procedure that if you do spot a trespasser in the car, there's a procedure that as the operator, you have to go through, call the BNSF police and so forth, and he gets removed from the train. And occasionally we'll get 100 tons of coal dropped on a trespasser, and we usually talk about that at the end of the session during the debrief. So it's kind of fun. There is 3 working defect detectors on the layout. It's set for random hotbox or shifted loads. It does count axles and provides temperature and things like that. It's locally enunciated on the layout rather than over the radio system. I didn't want to tie up the radio traffic with this the defect detector, because when you go through it, if there's no defects, it'll say it. So it's easy to listen to and hear locally as you're operating your train. And the dispatcher also has an icon on the panel to alert them that, hey, there's an issue with and that generates discussion between the crew and the dispatcher in terms of what has to be done. And there are coal protection cars. So if there's a hot box or something on a coal car that has to be set out, there's a loaded coal that can be put into the train to make sure that we meet the delivery contract requirements and keep moving. We do have a track scale. You can see the picture there. There's a hopper being weighed. This is a General Mills mill, and it's being switched by a track mobile. So there's some random weight. There's a parameter set within the scale, and the operator logs the weight as the car is loaded and leaves the property and goes to the BNSF interchange track. We use speedometers on the main line. This speed zone is 60 miles an hour. This train is passing is going 59. It's kind of fun to have these. If the operator is exceeding the speed, there's a loud audible alert, and that operator is going to get some ribbing. So it's kind of fun. And we try to slow the pace of operations. There are several crossings where we have working fusees, so the train crews have to stop and protect the crossing with a fusee. This is an industrial area on the branch line. We use derails quite often, almost everywhere, to protect the main line and the siding. Blue flags. If the operator spots a blue flag, they can't remove it or do anything that they need to. They've got to contact whoever put it there, which is in most cases me. And it's really all about having fun. We always have a number of guest operators on the layout. This is the yard master. Some take it, do a better job than others, and some just completely stress out. We have some husband and wife teams that operate here. We have these two guys on the right, lower right, are from the University of Colorado, has a program called Rail Buffs, and it's a group that follows prototype railroading and does model railroading also. So I'm happy to host those guys whenever I can. Seem to have a fun time. This is a father and son team from Germany that have been over a few times. And dispatching is always a popular job, both for Rocky Op and during regular sessions. And post-session at the end, I power off the layout exactly 12 hours, not 5 minutes after 12, but at 12 hours when everybody goes dead on the law. The actual DCC system is turned off and we stop dead. We typically have a briefing, a quick briefing to talk about how the session went. I always ask people to provide me with feedback, suggestions and how we can do things better. I love to hear everyone's ideas, and I've actually made a number of changes based on feedback. So it works out well. And I certainly thank everybody for coming and making the railroad come alive. I typically spend a few minutes backing up data, and then I just shut the whole place down and we go to dinner afterwards. There's always an optional dinner following the session at a local restaurant. And we typically, out of the 18 or 20 people, we generally get 12 or 14 people. So it's a fun event to have dinner after the session. And that's all I had in terms of my prepared remarks. And I think we've got some time for Q&A.
All right, John, thank you. Thank you so much for presenting. I saw at least a couple of comments about keep going, but
oh, okay.
Let me bring up the questions. There was a question about the helper coupler.
Yes.
About modifying that helper coupler. Do you want to explain? The question is, do you really need a special coupler? Or is it sufficient to remove the knuckle spring?
No, because if you remove the knuckle spring, it still might latch. There's on the hook. So what I've done is I've shaved off the part of the couple that hooks. And so when the helper connects to the end of the train, it's the coupler face is open and it's really shoving. It's just accepting it. So.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that on Mike Richdorf's layout. Okay. He was doing steam helpers, and it was like, I'd never seen that personally, but it's like, oh yeah, you start getting up there and the train takes off. You don't, if right. that helper is still connected, it's going to make an awful mess. So
yeah, and we've never really had an issue. It's because that coupler doesn't really connect, and yeah, it makes it more challenging for the operator because they're really focusing to make sure that they're connected and they're pushing and they're monitoring the slack action in the train, and it's much better. Yeah.
Yep. Let's see. Dave Hussman asks, are those protection cars prototypical? Never seen those used. Normally trains were trimmed out to size empty.
Yes. I've seen them up in the Powder River basin quite a bit. That's where I've seen them the most. And I know Denver's got some. I've seen them around a few places.
Okay. Let's see. That's actually everything that I've got. Oh, here we go. John, what weight standards do you use for your freight cars?
I'm at least NMRA, a little bit heavier. With the quality of some of these more modern cars, I don't, they're fine. I never really have any issues with tracking, but I'd rather have it heavier than lighter.
Okay. And then there's a question about where do you get your working derails?
A number of places. The one you saw a picture of was from Scotty's Model Railroad Shop, or Scott Thornton is his name, and he's got some 3D working derails. I've also made some from Details West kits parts. Those are the two primarily where I get them from.
All righty.
Scotty, I think it's Scotty's Model Shop. Something like that.
Scotty's Model Shop.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. And how about mentioning the phone system you use?
Okay, so there's a phone system for stationary positions like the traffic center, the dispatcher, the yard master, the crew lounge has a phone. I have a phone, a portable phone, and it's really a standalone telephone system with an intercom feature. And it's just on its own 4-wire system. They all work with each other. It's rather old. I mean, I put this in when I built the layout, so the technology's been out there, but it's just a standard phones with an intercom function, and they all seem to work together.
Okay.
And I have a portable that I carry as the superintendent in case anybody wants to call me.
Sure, of course. Oh, Jim Radke says Scotty's Model Shop in Ames, Iowa, for anybody who is wondering. That's in the chat. All right. It looks like that's all the questions. John uses, and it looks like Mike O'Neill is helping. I'm assuming he's one of your guys. He's helping out with some of the questions. How does conductor get key to operate switch if he is on the train?
So when a local leaves the yard, certain locals get keys. So when you pick up you're at the yard, you pick up your train in the switch list, you're issued a key. And all of the control points are keyed alike. So key fits everything, but only the locals that are going to use the control points in local or manual will receive a key so they can unlock the control point after they get authorization or authority from the dispatcher.
Okay. And then does the DS, I'm not sure what DS is, enable local crews to operate CTC switches, or do they just have to ask first?
They will call on the radio and request authority.
DS dispatcher, sorry.
Yeah, the dispatcher. So the dispatcher will give them verbal authority, and then they can unlock the padlock on the turnout and throw the switch motor. Now the dispatcher knows what's going on because they can see there's feedback on the turnouts to the CTC panel. So when the turnout is thrown, the dispatcher can see that on their panel. And if somebody were to throw a turnout, for example, that didn't have authority, it would, occupy the block and drop the signals and so forth. So it's verbal authority.
Got it. Okay. And Tom asking, what brand of electronics runs your signal system and detection?
Everything is Digitrax. The detection is Digitrax. The signal decoders are all Digitrax, and it's all connected through GMRI, my dispatcher's office, to the CATS CTC software.
And a question about any dark territory on the layout.
The branch line is FRA exempt, so that's dark, if you will, but there's typically only one train on the branch line at a time, on the branch lines, if you will. There's an industrial park that is fed from the traffic center. That's off the railroad property, if you will. It's a private, industrial park. And that's it, though, in terms of dark territory. Okay. Well, I think that's all for all the questions. So, John, thanks so much for presenting. I think everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.